The other major event this week around kind of momentum for USDC and the consortium behind it was the appointment of David Puth as Center CEO. We're incredibly blessed to have David join us with Alicia Haas, another board member from Center, also the CFO of Coinbase, to talk about the future of Center Consortium. Welcome, David and Alicia.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Excellent. So nice to have you guys here. So I wanted to kick off the conversation with just a little bit of backdrop on Center. Not everyone in the world is familiar with Center Consortium. Obviously, people who are really close to our industry are. But just the quick overview of Center Consortium. This is a consortium co-founded by Circle and Coinbase in 2018. Really with a mission and a vision to bring fiat standards for fiat digital currency, which are now called stablecoins, into the world, and to create both the open source technology so that those could exist as open source technical standards, but then also the governance that's needed, the governance of the technical standards, the policies that are needed to provide for security around issuance, provide for the reserve management that's needed to make stablecoins trustworthy and transparent, the compliance rules needed to be operating these kinds of issuing infrastructures. And of course, the first stablecoin introduced by Center Consortium was USD coin or USDC. So that's sort of where we started, and there's a lot there. I encourage anyone who's not familiar to go to center.io and download the white paper from 2 years ago, and you'll see that we're still just at the start of executing on the vision for Center. So that obviously leads us to today, where after an extensive search looking for the right senior executive leader, we are so privileged to bring on David Puth as Center CEO. Welcome to the job, David.
Jeremy, thank you. Jeremy and Alicia, thank you. And it's I couldn't be more enthused about joining, and particularly joining this week with the announcement of the Visa partnership, but also the tremendous, the explosion of volume that has taken place with USDC over the course of this year. My timing of joining feels very fortuitous. I feel very privileged to be part of this organization, and I thank you and the Center board for inviting me to be part of this opportunity.
Thank you, David. So let's talk a little bit about your journey, the work that you've done, and how that led you into this space and this specific opportunity.
Well, I appreciate that opportunity to share that. If I look career, I believe
we got a little frozen on you.
Was spent and involved in markets, businesses, derivatives. Pardon me?
We had an audio hiccup. It's okay. Keep going.
Okay. The bulk of the early part of my career was spent involved in markets, businesses, derivatives, some equities, emerging markets, commodities. But a constant throughout that time was my work with currencies. And that eventually led me to running the company CLS, which is the largest payment and settlement network in the world, processes over $2 trillion a day in international foreign exchange flows. So if I put those two businesses together, a very logical next step would be to move into this universe and take both my market experience as well as my payment and settlement experience and come to probably the only organization that I could bring those skills and hope to take business to the next level.
That's great. So, I mean, CLS is obviously an incredible, important infrastructure in the world. Not everyone, it's not a household name that, like Visa, but it's certainly as we talk about these trillions and trillions of dollars that slosh around in the movement of currency in the world, CLS is a key one. CLS was a consortium, right? A consortium of members. And it was also an organization that worked with central banks and as you look at sort of the fundamentals of how currency works in the world, just touch a little bit on the consortium side of it and what that looked like.
Well, CLS was born out of solving a problem to enable safe settlement with international currency flows. It was a private effort that received a great deal of attention from the public sector. CLS 70 members of the consortium. It truly enabled the rapid growth of the foreign exchange market to where it is today. The engagement with regulators was quite extensive. CLS is overseen by 22 central banks from around the world, primary regulator being the Federal Reserve. So in many ways, it has some similarities to what we're trying to build at Center. From a regulatory perspective, I think we're quite a bit different. But the consortium element and the network element of bringing disparate parties, at times competitive parties, together to work for the common good of building this network is something that I see very similar to what we're trying to accomplish with the Center Consortium.
That's great. That's very helpful. Obviously, an important factor as we thought about the future of how currency works in the world, how movement of value works in the world. Obviously, you've got quite a bird's eye view on that. I want to come back to Center and the future of Center, but first want to also introduce Alicia. Just a little history here, which is I've had the pleasure of working with Alicia for the past couple of years. I think one of the most important executives and leaders at the storied firm Coinbase. And obviously, Alicia, I just want to thank you for everything you and Coinbase have done for Center and USDC. So thank you. I want to talk a little bit about your own background and journey. How did you progress into crypto? And then, of course, what brought you and Coinbase into the co-founding of Center Consortium back when we put this together in 2018?
Sure. Well, I'll focus mostly on Coinbase and Center. My own journey is one that I grew up in financial services and just saw the opportunity for crypto to transform how we interact with financial assets and money, and thought there was a huge opportunity to do things more efficiently, faster, and cheaper. And that really ties closely to USDC, because when we had the opportunity, Jeremy, to partner with Circle and bring forth the Center Consortium, what Coinbase saw was really the opportunity for a stable asset that was compliant, that was accessible. And we really valued a digital programmable dollar that had ubiquity and the ability for many different parties. And as David just alluded to, oftentimes competitors to plug into one network. So we view that stablecoins have the same function as a US dollar, but they're faster, cheaper, and smarter. And we view that this has the opportunity to really transform many different payment processes on a global basis, much like Visa's team sees in it as well. And we believe this is one of the important building blocks of the future of finance. So we were excited to join you to be a very compliant first model and ensure that we provided the safety and security to all of our users to be able to transact with stablecoins and USDC specifically.
Awesome. Thank you. So maybe turning to Center and the future of Center a bit here, David, as you come on board, it would be great to hear you talk about, what you'd like to see develop for Center in the next year.
Well, I start with, again, the number one goal is to continue the steady growth path that, frankly, the explosive growth path USDC has been over the course of the year, building on multiple chains and continuing to expand both the user base and the number of use cases around the world. And if I start there, there's a lot to do and a lot to build. USDC has clearly been adopted by many different users, and my goal will be to continue that process. But additionally, we'll be adding people and processes to help support that effort, where we have a strong goal of bringing comparably strong members to the consortium to add to what Circle and Coinbase have been able to do, bringing people, building those control processes that will be helpful to enable the consortium to be recognized worldwide as the leading stablecoin, and then eventually moving into using what we've done to build USDC to launch future stablecoins around the globe and other currencies. So there is no shortage at all of things that I hope to accomplish in the next year, and hope very much to be sitting here a year from now and talk about the fact that we've been able to cover a lot of those goals.
I'm going to put it on the calendar. That's awesome. There's a lot to do, obviously, and what you've outlined is significant, and we're excited to see you build it. Alicia, I know from our extensive work together, you're incredibly passionate about the growth of USDC itself. I'd love to hear you talk about what you think can drive that growth in the next year.
Oh, we're going to scope just a year? All right. Well,
just a year. We're going to come to the long term in a few minutes.
All right. Well, I think over the next year, I hope to see continued growth in DeFi. So DeFi, or decentralized finance, for those who may be newer to crypto, really takes this open financial system a step further and enables a world where every financial service we use today, whether it's loans or savings accounts, trading, or insurance, are accessible to anyone in the world on a global basis in a peer-to-peer way. And I think that DeFi, obviously, we've seen explosive growth. It's now at 13 billion invested, and this number has more than doubled since the end of Q3, or since August. So huge growth there, and I continue to expect that to grow in the future. And that relies heavily on USDC as well. I also think we're going to see growth in the next year of connecting USDC to other major payment companies, like we just saw with Visa. Consumers are looking for different options, and we're hearing that loud and clear through our own customer research, where we think that this is becoming a viable method of payment for millions of people on a global basis in both the developed and developing economies. And then as I think about towards the end of next year, I hope that we're going to start to see expanded use cases, payments, FX treatments, dollarization, potentially more distribution of aid like we're starting to see now, cross-border payments. And I think when I look at those opportunities, there's so many middlemen and expensive payment types, long settlements, and friction. And I think that USDC can eliminate a lot of that pain point that we see. And so I hope to see a lot of use cases kind of on the emerging side, maybe not contributing to a ton of growth, but starting to emerge with those new payment rails.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're definitely seeing that emerging. It's the early adopters are coming in with it, and it'll be fascinating to see. I mean, I think this theme of connecting major payments companies is a really important one. I think part of the investment that we've made as Center is making sure that USDC can scale to support consumer scale use cases, hundreds of millions of users with tens of thousands of transactions per second. And so there's a lot of work we're doing, obviously, to improve that and make that possible. I want to turn a little bit to a subject that's been actually in the news this week as well. I won't talk about the news, but I'll talk about the subject, which is really this sort of emerging legal and regulatory frameworks for stablecoins. This has really become a major theme. Global supranational players like the FSB opining on it, the Bank of International Settlements. It's got strong attention, places like the Treasury Department, central banks around the world. So this is a big theme. And David, I think you had to chart a path on this, in sort of core fundamental global market infrastructure. As you noted, working with central banks. It would be great to just talk a little bit about your experience, the relevance for that, what is relevant, and what's in store for stablecoins as we go from a relatively small size today to potentially handling trillions of dollars in assets and payment volumes in the coming year. So a little bit about that experience, and then also, what's different? What do you see as you look at this that's different about stablecoins compared to traditional kind of regulated market infrastructure?
Yeah, thank you. It's a fairly complex question, because the difference today between operating a highly regulated financial institution as CLS is, and one that operates with almost an entire focus on safety and soundness. What the internet has provided us with, and this technology that has been built, has provided us with a whole new means of being able to transfer money in the same way that we would move an email. We can move financial assets across the internet, and I think it's going to continue to attract a reasonable amount of regulatory attention. Regulators have not been shy about expressing their views about stablecoin. It's been written about over the last several years. The BIS in particular has come out and talked about what their expectations are. And certainly my experience at CLS is one that I'd like to think I can apply to help with the growth of what I expect we will be doing together in growing USDC and future stablecoins. It starts with transparency, and I am very pleased to join an organization where Coinbase and Circle have really set an example and led by example in the industry of working very closely with the regulatory community and being very transparent about our activities. At the same time, it involves a strong process of us engaging in such a way to help the regulatory community understand where the risks are similar to those that might exist in traditional money transmission and where they're fundamentally different. And those differences are very apparent in the way our technology works. And so I hope very much to draw on the experience and draw on our connectivity with the regulatory community to work together to ensure that they have in our system that that will be hundreds of millions of users on our system going forward. And in order to do that, the faster and bigger we grow, the more regulatory attention we will attract. And I fully expect that we'll be able to work closely with policymakers and regulators to ensure and instill in them the confidence that they need to be able to support the growth of our systems.
It's a big job, but I completely see it, and we're excited to have you working on it with us. Alicia, I know you and Coinbase are incredibly passionate about how this technology can lead to this open financial system, and I guess what does that look like to you, and also kind of how can the so-called global stablecoin arrangements, the FSB terminology, such as Center, which is a global stablecoin arrangement, how can that work hand in hand with policymakers, regulators, central banks in a way that we can preserve and enable this vision of an open financial system?
Sure. So to say it bluntly, I mean, Coinbase's mission is to create an open financial system, and that promise is to make money and payments universally accessible, no matter where they are. And USDC definitely helps enable that vision. I think the way that Center needs to work with regulators and central banks to ensure that we can execute on that vision is to first and foremost start with education. There is a lot of misnomers in stablecoins today, and I think there's also, as you know, Jeremy and David as well, there's just a breadth. There's different permutations of stablecoins, and USDC is differentiated amongst that universe because it is very thoughtfully constructed to be compliant and to intersect with the traditional banking network and the central banks. And so, one, I think we need to educate all regulators on how Center has been constructed to support those markets, and also how it is innovating and creating new opportunities to bring an open financial system to all users. I think that it is a model that CBDCs can follow. I think it is a thoughtfully constructed model to protect consumers and to enable transparent and reliable payment rails while using established banks to hold the regulated, audited US dollars backing the USDC. So I think that more than anything, we need to just meet with people, we need to educate, and we need to continue to evolve the model to ensure that it meets the global regulatory frameworks that will be sure to come forth in the coming years.
Yeah, it's been fascinating how fast some of these topics have really come to the fore. I mean,
yeah,
we're getting outreach from projects and central banks all around the world who are saying, how do we do this? And how do we do it with the private sector? How do we do it with private sector issuers? This model that we've been able to drive with USDC can be a model that can work around the world, and so it'll be interesting. David, just under your leadership, you're not only going to be taking on more members, but you're going to be building up the staff considerably. What are some of the critical areas of focus as you build out the team at Center? And for our listeners, if you know people in these areas, we're obviously going to want to hear from you. But just talk a little bit about how you're building this out.
Well, the simple message, I think you just said it, is we're open for business and we're hiring, and we're very excited about building a world-class team to support a world-class product. The work that's Circle and Coinbase have done to establish the foundation for Center is quite evident, and I've seen that in my first few days of operating here. But building out a technology fund that's supportive of the work that our consortium members are doing will be part of job number one. A very strong regulatory affairs team and compliance team that can engage with both our consortium members, the community, and importantly, again, the regulatory community and policymakers. Business development will remain, again, top of list as I expect we will be expanding into other stablecoins in other countries. We are building a completely decentralized company, so I expect that Center will have employees at various locations around the world as we try to fulfill our mission of trying to bring the stablecoin universe to other parts of the world and increase financial inclusion in the way that we hope to be able to do so. So I am very excited about building the team. It is a very blank canvas today, and one that's very exciting to be looking at this time.
So we'll have folks stay tuned for job descriptions on center.io, and hopefully that'll be coming soon. So it's obviously all very exciting. As we wrap up here, I want to turn to the future, the way off future, and on the show, I like to ask people about imagining that future a little bit. So let's sit here and imagine what Center could become. What is the role of stablecoins in the world in 5 or 10 years? What's their scale of usage and adoption? What could that look like? And would love to hear from both of you. Alicia, maybe you could start.
I will start. I expect over the next 5 to 10 years, I expect my children to be opening their first bank accounts in stablecoins as opposed to fiat currencies. I think that stablecoins can improve upon fiat's usability and access and make the system faster, more efficient, and reduce the cost of entry. But to do this, I think we're going to have to see a smooth integration with the existing financial system. And with that will come clear regulations, frameworks to build trust, protections against fraud and other undesirable activities. And that we need to have standards at Center and to promulgate the quality, the interoperability, the programmability of these smart contracts to drive growth and acceptance. So I expect us to see huge growth in all of those areas over the next 5 to 10 years, broad adoption in the areas we talked about, DeFi, payment rails, usability in all forms of commerce. And I'm excited for this future to build it with you all.
That was great, Alicia. David, give us your 5-year plan.
Well, I can only follow on what Alicia has said here, and that my children are already opening up their USDC wallets, and I expect that usage will continue to grow. What I would anticipate and what I really hope we strive for is to be able to bring the use of stablecoins to emerging and developed markets. We're aware of the fact that there are 3 billion people in the world who are either unbanked or have limited access to the financial resources that we all have grown accustomed to. And I believe that the use of stablecoins will help enable some portion of that population to be able to access financial services that just haven't been available to them in the past. So if I had a dream of what 5 years from now looks like, it will be broad adoption from the domestic and international corporate world, but equally it will be the initial signs of adoption from less developed countries where people can really use the benefits that stablecoins can bring. And I think that would be a great sign of success and what the future of money really looks like.
Absolutely. We're looking for WhatsApp and WeChat scale adoption. So I think it's on the horizon. Well, David and Alicia, such a great pleasure to have you on the show today. And of course, very, very excited about continuing to build all this out together. So thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you.